I'm going to share a few verses from Isaiah 58, beginning from verse 1 to 9, um, and some verses from Matthew 5 before I share a reflection on it. So in Isaiah 58, the prophet says, "Shout out, do not hold back. Lift up your voice like a trumpet. Announce to my people their rebellion, to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet day after day they seek me and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that practiced righteousness and did not forsake the ordinance of their God. They ask me for righteous judgments, they delight to draw near to God. Why do we fast, but you do not see, they say? Why humble ourselves, but you do not notice? Look, you serve your own interests on your fast day and oppress all your workers. Look, you fast only to quarrel and fight and to strike with a wicked fist. Such fasting as you do today will not make your voice heard on high. Is such the fast I choose? A day to humble oneself? Is it to bow down the head like a bulrush, to lie in sackcloth and ashes? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the fast I choose? To loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them or clothe them, and not to hide yourself from your own kin? Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall go forth before you. The glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and he will say, Here I am." And now a reading from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5, beginning at verse 13. "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but it is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." One of the joys of living in rural Aberdeenshire is the smells that waft through the trees to our house coming from the fields that are not far away, as our house is on the edge of the village. Each season seems to have its distinctive smell, whether it is the smell of spring blossom, the smell of freshly cut hay, the smell of harvest, but that is followed by the smell of muck being spread on the fields before they are ploughed in the autumn. But we've got used to it and know it's doing good for the soil. Now, what has all that got to do with this passage in Matthew 5 that we've just read? Well, because I am convinced that when Jesus spoke of us being the salt of the earth, he was not referring to table salt, but to fertilizer salt. And on what basis do I come to that conclusion? Well, for two reasons. He said, "You are the salt of the earth." Now, the Greek word is more ambiguous, and like the English, you could understand it to mean our planet Earth, though it could equally be understood as meaning arable land. The word Jesus would have used in his native Aramaic language clearly refers to land or soil. Furthermore, Luke's version says that if the salt has lost its saltiness, it is fit for neither soil nor the manure heap. Thirdly, farmers in Palestine in those days used salt that had probably come from either the Red Sea or the Mediterranean Sea. It was full of impurities, nitrates and phosphates that are used in fertilizers today, and they would either sprinkle it on the land they were about to plough or mix it with manure before spreading that on the field. Now, our calling, therefore, as followers of Jesus is not to preserve what is, but to be the agents of transformation by being a fertilizing presence in the soil of the world. What does fertilizer do? Well, it enhances the growth of the seed, which is the good news of God's loving care and merciful forgiveness that has been sown in the soil of humanity. And remember that the word for human in the Hebrew is actually Adamah. Adam is not a proper name. It's simply earthling. It's an earth creature. And note, it's not what we are doing, but what God is doing that is often hidden to start with, that's what we're fertilizing. And we do that firstly, perhaps through our prayers, and secondly, by being a loving presence in the community. And notice that the you, our salt, is the you plural. So yes, we are salt, but for the earth, not for ourselves, not for a closed fellowship, not for church. Just as fertilizer or manure will kill growth if it's concentrated in one spot, so we, as fertilizing salt, will not be effective if we are concentrated in church buildings and only focused on doing the religious stuff in church, thinking that God will be pleased with us and answer our prayers, mostly for our own well-being. Nor will it be effective if the salt loses its fertilizing properties. To lose its taste could be translated become insipid. To become insipid is to lose one's distinctiveness, or in this case to lose one's fertilizing qualities. And it's a word also that was used metaphorically to mean act foolishly. Now, just as pure sodium chloride is ineffective as a fertilizer, focusing on our own religious purity rather than that on our mission to the community in which we live will result in the loss of our fertilizing quality. Our distinctive calling is forgotten, and therefore the salt is rendered useless. It's become uninteresting. So what we're doing by gathering together is to listen to what God might be teaching us through the scriptures, and to being nourished in our spirits by the sacraments, and to encourage each other as we have coffee afterwards to remain faithful through our difficulties, or as we meet one another through the week. And in doing so, we make sure we don't become insipid or dilute our fertilizing qualities through foolish actions when we go out into the world to love and serve the Lord, as we say at the end of our service. Secondly, he said, you are the light of the world. Now, what we see through our eyes is only one form of light. In the Aramaic sense of the word that Jesus would have used, nuhre, meaning light, is also revealed through the rest of our senses: hearing, smelling, touching, tasting, and what today we would call body awareness. Only through all our senses do we know or recognize anything. And from this point of view, it is not our eyes that are seeing or our ears that are hearing. Sure, we sense and see and hear by means of them, but what is it that is seeing? And who is seeing within us? What gathers and organizes all the myriad impressions we receive every moment into distinct objects, as well as into our perception of ourselves and others? Now that is the mystery of consciousness, which science has so far been unable to fathom. But what if our consciousness is simply due to the fact that the divine source of light is shining through us? The phrase, you are the light of the world, is saying that we are not this impermanent, ever-changing, earthbound self that we assume we are. We are not defined by the thoughts and emotions which we usually identify with. Rather, our true self is the light or knowing self that illuminates and reveals the truth behind what appears in the outward forms we perceive. So we are part of the thinking and knowing, the consciousness of the cosmos. Now that can only be the case when our small earthbound self is intimately connected to the divine source of all selfhood, as was the case in Jesus. And when Jesus said, I am the light of the world, in in Aramaic, inana nuhred alma, what it really was saying is that my eye, my earthbound eye, connected to the great I am, is the light, which is the way we can be light too. So while the light of this knowing is already within us, we aren't usually aware of it because it is what sees. It's a bit like trying to see the back of your hand while looking in a mirror. However, Jesus is not speaking just about each of us shining in our small corner, I in mine and you in yours, as the well-known children's chorus puts it. You, the you plural, are the light of the world. So he adds, a city built on a hill cannot be hidden. That is, we are a community of conscious beings. And that community has a collective consciousness that is built on a hill. And the Aramaic word Jesus uses implies that it is a mountain formed by fire, a volcano, if you like, that cannot be hidden or overshadowed. So if we awake to the source of knowing within us, and if we realize that our personal and collective consciousness perches on the fiery heart from which all creation and all levels of being are formed, we will be, which is the meaning of the word Alma in the Aramaic, we will be the flame of a lamp that warns others and produces clarity. Now that is the role of the prophet. And just before we picked up Jesus' teaching in the Sermon on the Mount at verse 13, Jesus had said, "Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." So by that saying, Jesus implies that we are called to be the prophetic people, to continue on the ministry of Jesus, one of whose roles was a prophet, as well as being a priest and a king. So Jesus continues, "No one after lighting a lamp puts it under a bushel basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house." Now, in first century Palestine, poor people or poor families often lived communally in one large single room, a dwelling that housed as many as 50 people. Now, each family would have had its own area, its own lamp holder that would shine light there. And if a poor family ran out of lamp oil, they might have to depend on a neighbouring family for light. So a generous family would not hoard its light. So we are not meant to limit or measure our light, which is the implication of putting it under a bushel, a container for measuring, but to allow the light of reality to shine in us and through us clear in an unveiled way. And as St. Paul put it, all of us with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord, of Yahweh, as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, the Spirit. So if you receive a vision or can see some truth that illuminates the circumstances we are in, we naturally want to share it. And if you keep it to yourself, you either suffocate the flame for want of air, or if you keep it veiled in your inner life, well, you can only do that for so long, but without denying the reality of the vision. So we are generous with illumination when we allow it to penetrate all parts of our being, and then we embody the light fully and put it into practice. He continues, "In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." Now, based on the root sounds of these words in the Aramaic text, we could paraphrase this as follows. Now, this comes from something I've learned from Neil Douglas Klotz in his Aramaic Jesus, or the Revelations of the Aramaic Jesus, but I've put them into a simpler form and my own words to make it more easily understandable. So here, Here and now, allow the light that illuminated the darkness from the first creative moment of the universe to shine out naturally in and through you, to illuminate your whole human earthly self, and all with whom you come into contact. And they will perceive unfolding through your works of service and love, done just at the ripe moment, which is what the word good, tov in Hebrew, means. So they will see and perceive through your works of service and love done just at the right moment a reminder that the one who has birthed us into existence is really nurturing the cosmos each moment, and they will give glory to the source of your actions in heaven, in that heavenly dimension, the spiritual dimension. So we let the light of Christ shine out through us for all to see by doing what is in the Isaiah passage we read from Isaiah 58. This is the fast that we want, that is required of us. Loosing the bonds of injustice, undoing the thongs of the yoke of slavery, letting the oppressed go free, breaking every yoke. And we do so by sharing our bread with the hungry and bringing the homeless poor into our homes, and by clothing the poor when we see them naked, and not by not being blind to the needs of poor people, and particularly, for example, the foreigners, not just our own kith and kin, even asylum seekers that are genuine. Well, we could add lots of personal examples to how we do this, maybe on the small scale, but also maybe because we actually want to call our political leaders to account. And we need to remember, as in the run-up to the Scottish election, and in England it's the local council elections. But anyway, we need to make sure that the policies that they are putting in their manifestos are going to do something about decreasing the inequality, the gap between the rich and the poor. So then, of course, it will also affect everything else, which we've just seen in this passage. Now, verse 13 to 16, on which I've focused my talk now, form the conclusion to the prologue to what has been called Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Our corporate mission is to serve as salt and light for the world. Such a task cannot be accomplished by independent individuals. It is one that we must work at together. But that will only be through individuals who are in tune and in rhythm with the melody of life itself. And it is the blessed attitudes with which the sermon begins